Conversations with leading experts in enterprise resource planning. Evolving ERP. Powered by Insight Jam.
Welcome back to episode number 3 of Evolving ERP. Thanks for coming back. We've got a special edition, special all Australia, all Queensland edition lined up for you with 2 ERP luminaries here. I've talked to them before and really excited to have them on the show. Judith O'Callaghan and Paul Coetser coming to you on Evolving ERP. So glad to have you on for this episode, Judith and Paul.
Thank you very much. It's good to be on the show, and hope we have a good discussion today.
Absolutely. With you two on, I do not doubt it. But it is your both your first time on Evolving ERP. I know you've done other shows and panels with us before, but why don't we start with Judith? If you could just let the people know a little bit about yourself, where you're coming from, and what you're up to.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Ryan, for this opportunity. I have been in the ERP industry for over 20 years, and ERP has been my passion since my graduation. So I do program management for a living, and Paul Coetser is a leader I look up to. So it's great to be on the show.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. Paul, if you could let the folks know a little bit more about yourself.
When I finished blushing with Judith's comments, morning, Ryan, and thanks for having me on the show. So my background is I've been in ERP 28 years, and I've come up through the ranks, technical, functional, analyst, architect, project manager, all the way up to contract CTO, advisor, where I operate in today, certified on 6 ERP platforms, and provide advisory services to clients on how to migrate principally in the SAP space, on how to migrate to S4, and then how to also structure and sweat and leverage their technology investments, particularly in the SAP space.
Excellent. So actually, Paul, why don't we keep going with you? I just want to know a little bit more about, you touched on it a little bit, but your ERP journey, sort of what got you into ERP. It's a field that I feel like your average person doesn't know much about, but there's obviously a very vibrant and informed community around it that I'm personally discovering. So what got you into it? Where are you coming from there?
A workplace injury. I started out my career as a forklift crane driver at an aluminium smelter, and I injured my arm, and I was put onto light duty in the office, admin work, and I was paired with a great individual, Arun Patel, and he showed me the ropes, showed me how to use a computer, showed me how to use a mouse and keyboard and some basic SAP transactions, which I initially was terrible at, but eventually got the ropes of it, and from there, the rest is history. I learned how to do purchase requisition. I learned what open to buy was, and all these weird and wonderful things coming from a non-business background, just a young fella, and then moved into very junior consulting with IBM a long time ago. Went on the fast track training, where you spent a month training on SAP. And in those days, unlike today, where you have a finance specialist or a materials management or a warehouse specialist, we had to train on every module in SAP and be able to configure the entire thing. And then from there, just progressed my career, different roles, business analyst, technical, functional, tried my hand at project management. It was okay. It didn't like it very much because it took me away from the solution space, which was my first love. Then moved into the architecture space, and then up into CTO, head of advisory strategy, contract roles for clients, and then into the pure advisory space where I am today. That's been an amazing journey. And yes, so it's an interesting remark you make. The ERP community is it's very close to the outside, but once you're on the inside, it's almost like you've discovered a new realm.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I've been, in the few months that I've been exposed to it, I've been kind of blown away at how passionate people are about it, about something I had never heard of before this year. So, it's great to see it. Yeah, coming all the way from the manufacturing angle is absolutely fascinating. Judith, how about yourself? How did your ERP journey get started?
I had a very different entry into ERP world when compared to Paul. So my passion for ERP started when I was in college, when I was doing my, doing an MBA. So I was looking for what I was looking for is something that brings all aspects of business together. And for me at that time, ERP was the solution. So I was reading Jan's books, and it's a great privilege to get to know him over the years and to form a relationship with him, and also general ERP leaders. What again fascinated me was just getting to know the leaders as I was looking for opportunities and other things. So my entry into the ERP space was very unique and interesting. I was working for a family-owned logistics business, doing everything from warehousing to distribution to many other things. And a friend called me and said, okay, there is a thing called SAP, which is new to India. This was early 2000s. So, and said, this sounds like what you're looking for. Would you like to have a chat? And then a coffee became a job offer. And that came with SAP training course and the certifications and everything. As Paul said, one thing I clearly remember is to be able to be certified back in those days, a very similar time as Paul, I believe. We need to be able to set up the whole thing in SAP or the ERP to be able to do that. That all gave us very good relationships, understanding, and more importantly, the way the business works. So from then I progressed on to functional consulting, program management, and now in strategy and advisory.
Wow. So, okay. Well, I will say I'm glad that your journey didn't also involve an injury at the workplace. If a pattern emerged there, I'd be kind of concerned, but no, that's really, it's fascinating to see how. Yeah. Yeah, no, I hope not, and I'm glad to see that it's not. But that being said, and having learned a little more about you, I'll now step out of your way, and the real ERP in-depth discussion can begin. So Judith and Paul, take it away and have some fun.
And thank you, Ryan. And Paul, here we are. So let's start from the beginning of the beginnings, right? So you and I had very different journeys into the ERP world, and we have seen different things. Between us, I would say we've covered more than six or seven countries just by living there, and also multiple continents. So you can start with your journey into the ERP world and the uniqueness of the ERP family, and then I can share mine for the audience.
So mine, I'm ex-South African. I'm Australian now with a dodgy accent, as I always tell people. Did a lot of consulting work in South Africa, and then moved over and moved up into Central Africa and Northern Africa, and then over to the Middle East, and then did consulting pretty much all the continents except China. Haven't been there physically yet, but yeah, 40 odd countries. Most of the industries, so government, drug, pharmacom, manufacturing, retail, supply chain specialists, 3PL, 4PL, mining, utilities. So I've been very, very blessed to have had a smorgasbord of industries that I've moved around in. I've moved around the world. I've been in Australia now 15 years. So I call Oz home, down under, and I consult all over the world. And I sort of have built a bit of a niche for the larger projects. So typically the 50 million, 100 million up club. I enjoy the complexity. I enjoy the challenges, and you touched on it earlier, Judith, around one of our fundamental strengths is during our training in the early years. Is we had to go across all those domains, right? We had to understand the financial aspects, the materials management aspects, the warehouse, and you couldn't just configure something one way and not worry about the implications for the people in the field, for example. So you had to have those ready conversations, and the other, dare I say, side effect of that is you had to do early stakeholder engagement, and it was so important for us, even in those forming years when we were finding our feet and understanding what the technology couldn't do. By virtue of having to be across all those domains, we were forced to build early stakeholder engagement skills. And I will tell you that stood me in good stead over the years, because without your stakeholders, none of your experience and value can be brought to full fruition. Have you had similar experiences as a result?
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, this is one of the things that I think it was a gift at early stage in the career. So I'm from South India, and most of us who grew up in that era, we were used to different constraints. For example, power interruption. Yes, we lived it, breathed it, and we know what it is. And running a business with all those constraints and the delays, and at that time, a lot of things were different, because India at this point in time is globalized. It's different, and we can run business very similar to any first world country, but at that time it was very, very different. It was a growing economy, so it came with its growing challenges, and having ERP implemented there had its challenges. So I've had the blessing of implementing ERPs in many parts of India and Southeast Asia, and then moved on to Middle East and Europe and different countries. So very much like you have covered multiple countries of very different aspects and very different constraints. And then I moved on to US, Europe, and back to Australia. So it has been a blessing to know the world. And as you say, we are, people who trained with us had the privilege of understanding the ERP world as a whole, configuring it from the start and understanding the whole thing, the implications. We know who to engage, and we also know how one decision affects the other, the butterfly effect. So you change one thing here, it affects many other things. So it made us more empathetic, considerate, and the decisions became more informed. So that is, I think, a gift that was given to us at the early part of the career that will continue to stay with us. So for anyone considering an entry into the ERP world, between Paul and I, I'm sure, Paul, you agree with me. Just do it. Give it a chance. It is a beautiful way to create a world that is more meaningful to you and to everyone.
I will say this for anyone who's considering a prospective career in ERP is there's never a dull moment. That even if you've conquered major issues at a client and you've resolved them, you take that learning to another client, I can almost guarantee you there'll be a nuance or a kink in the second and third and fourth client where you're continuously learning. So one of your key success factors or one of your characteristic attributes is to be open to learning. I'm generally in a room with people significantly smarter than me, and it's always the opportunity to learn and listen and understand about how other people approach problems. And you'll be stunned at the number of times I've been at clients and we're wrestling with a problem, and someone who's been in the business, who's been quiet for 45 minutes in a conversation, will just pop up and go, "Why don't you do this?" And you go, "Wow, where'd that come from?" And they've solved the problem, right? So it's amazing. It's such a privilege to be around those kind of people, because they bring a dynamic and an energy to the room. And you go through highs and lows. You go through the valley of tears and all the rest of it. It's a well-documented psychological profiles of the maturity of the project. But being and interacting with these people is fascinating. I've been doing this for 28 years. And I always tell people, unless I had bills to pay, I'd do this for free. I love what I do. I do not struggle to get out of bed in the morning. I can't wait for the day, because I know it's going to bring something new.
Absolutely right. And between us both, and many of us, our colleagues, would say that even if there is no money, we would continue doing it. And that's the connection of the ERP world and the relationships that we have and with others in the ecosystem. It's more like family. Answers come from unexpected places, and we stay connected to each other. We keep each other informed, posted, and other things.
Want more Insight Jam? Follow us on Instagram for exclusive content like a daily dose of best practices and buying advice from industry experts and leading solution providers. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel for long-form highlights from our expert panel discussions. And if you prefer to listen, please rate and review the Insight Jam podcast on Apple, Spotify, or Google. The Solutions Review team is hard at work collecting the best enterprise technology information from around the globe, so don't miss out. Now, let's get back to the show.
So, Paul, when I look at it historically, we've been through a lot of changes, especially in the ERP space. So, from when we started to now, ERP as an industry has evolved, and a lot of changes have been introduced or has happened. So, and my take on it is just that, like in everything in the world, life changes. We learn, we apply, and we adjust. And the same with technology. It is a part of life, and we have learned how to navigate the changes or navigate the good with the bad and get all the good things. So for the audience, let's hear your perspective and then probably add to mine, and then we move on to AI. Yeah.
So at its core, I would tell the community ERP pretty much as a fundamental principle hasn't changed in 40 years. It's still an integrated collection of the core back office functions. What has changed is the user experience, the speed, the enrichment, the reporting and analytics, the data and the data sets that you have available. But in essence, an accounting function that you did in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s is pretty much the same. Yeah, there's legislative changes, but a journal transaction is a journal transaction, right? A posting is a posting. A P&L statement is a P&L statement. The layouts and regulatory frameworks may have changed the look and feel a little, but it's still, if you put that in front of an accountant from the 70s, they don't recognize and be able to interpret it. I would say on the periphery is where a lot of the enrichment has occurred. Bolt-ons, add-ons, supplementary industry verticals where the software vendors have put specialization in. For Oracle or SAP, for example, in the utilities space or retail space, they have specialized offerings, and those have become highly tuned to those market sectors. And so those are the principal things I've seen. But as a core, at its highest level and synthesized down to its most base atomic structure, for want of better expression, I would say ERP is largely unchanged. And in particular, from a monolithic structure, you hear about a composable ERP, and we'll touch on that in a minute. Now, I've got very strong views on what constitutes composable ERP versus what I would suggest some of the sales collateral is intimating, and some real world experiences of what they consider composable ERP and what clients experience it as.
And that's very true, right? So that's fundamentally how I think, totally to what you said. So has business changed over the years? Yes and no. The fundamentals of business remain the same. And it's a group of people coming together to do something. And very similar to ERP. So as you said, accounting is accounting, sales is sales, and HR is HR and all that stuff. So yes, there is a lot of bolt-ons and add-ons and different ways of doing things that have come in and evolved just with any technology, but the fundamentals remain the same. And I would say in our case, we both thank Jan Ban for that main idea of bringing everything together and giving us a better world. This is one way of connecting all the bits and pieces. It's more like a puzzle coming together. That's what ERP is. That's how I see it. And yes, it's a beautiful thing. And also, from my perspective, the main thing that I think about in 20 years that has changed, I'm sure you would see it as well, is the speed of execution. So when we look at setup, so especially when when I was doing my first implementation, I would say the first 2 months was totally, the nuts and bolts of the work. Like somebody had to set the server room up. We had to put the servers in place, physically connect it and do the installations, and multiple CDs of basis stuff coming from Germany and decoded, uncoded, multiple to the post office. So all that stuff. Yeah. So these days you can skip all the setup and probably do it in 2 to 3 days. The speed of execution is drastically different when we look at it. And with the cloud coming in and other things, there is a lot of things that we have learned over the past that we can recycle, reuse, repurpose. So that's same in the ERP world as well. So there is a lot more capital now available that we can tap into.
Yeah, the tools and the methodologies are amazing. I remember crawling around on the floor at 2:00 in the morning in the Middle East, A0 sheets that we printed. The old. Do you remember the old EPC diagrams?
Yeah,
The
I
enterprise
know.
process change
It's the big sheets.
with the tiny little hexagonal things. Crawling around on the floor with my colleagues with different colored strings and pushing the process that we'd agreed and mapped to the business
Oh, yeah.
to manually map the EPC so that we could go back and configure the system. Today, it's all digitized, and you've got the BPM inflows, and you've got the repositories, the BPMLs, and Oracle has similar tools. Jan Bond, with his enterprise model, had the dynamic modeling back in the day in '96. I worked on it. You look at that, and it's such a far cry in the tooling and capability, which brings me to a point. I'm still stunned today why ERP projects fail, and 99.9% of the time it is not technologically based. It's based on the business change, the culture, the governance, the SI, and the client, and the ability to match the requirements. It's almost got nothing to do with the technology aspect. The technology will deliver. So that's fascinating. Yeah, but I remember the old manual days and manually processing RDocs and yeah.
So
Far in the rearview mirror.
Very true, right? So the fundamental is, yes, we have had a lot of learning over the 20 years, and we have enough collateral, a lot of collateral from very different people, very different organizations. So there is material there, and there is applications there, and there is enough technology there which can get life done a lot easier these days. So you touched on a very good point and a very deep point, probably for a different discussion. There is no reason now why transformations should fail, because there is enough material, enough sweat and hard work has been put in the past, which enables us to set things up for success. So now with the advent of AI, there is multiple views on it. So, you and I have a take on it. So my take on it is quite simple. It's another tool which is introduced in our space, and it is up to us humans to use it in the right way. And organizations, if they choose to, they can benefit a lot from AI. So Paul, you and I are from an era where machine learning first came in. Like we have seen the growth of it. We've seen we have seen the way how machine learning and all this analytics took place, and we were running reports, lots and lots of reports in our first implementations. And now look at the way we are doing things with dashboards and alerts and many other things just for our day-to-day work. So I'll get your take on it, and I'll add mine. Yeah.
So, if a pure AI question and answer, for me, yeah, I agree. AI is just another tool. So, analogy: if you're sitting at a dinner table and you have a knife and a fork and a spoon, all you've added is a teaspoon or a fish knife, right? It's how you wield it that determines the value and your understanding of when and how to use it. To extend the analogy, you wouldn't use a fish knife to try and cut a steak. You'd use a steak knife to cut a steak. So the alignment of the use case with the technology is critically important. And again, I have to express some reservation with some of the sales hype that goes around. And I know that's their job, right? They've got to pump this up and they've got to get the sales engine going. And I understand it. But what it does principally is it creates confusion with the clients who are trying to wrestle and understand this technology. And what I advise clients is it is just another tool, but you need to understand the prereqs that are involved. Like any capability you're trying to instantiate in the enterprise, you need to understand the prereqs. You need some governance around it. You need to understand the legislative framework, the regulatory frameworks. If you want to have a good laugh, then just go and have a look at what Canada Air did when they unleashed their AI. It went and rewrote a policy for a customer on the fly. Now, that's an interesting use case, but it serves to highlight you need to be ready before you unleash it, right? You need to be make sure you've got a governance control framework and that you're accountable for the responses and the outputs. You can't blame it on the AI. The AI is doing what it was programmed to do, and the inputs and the outputs are a result of that function. So I tell clients, make sure you understand the use case. And then one of the success drivers around AI, the single most important one, is the data and the quality thereof. if you're going to overlay an LLM or whatever you want to do, a narrow AI on top of a data pile, don't be surprised if you have some weird and wonderful responses because your data governance has been lacking. My suggestion to those clients is rather go away and invest some time in putting in place some data governance and cleansing. And then not only will you have a better result, but you'll also de-risk your investment, because at some point your AI is going to productionize its outputs and you're going to be accountable either internally to your customer base, so other people in the enterprise, or external to a customer or supply chain or somebody where your liabilities are exposed to the outside world. So AI is great. All I would say is caveat emptor. Go in with your eyes open and make sure you understand what it is you're unleashing. But it is just another tool. I'm less hype driven around AI because it is actually just narrow, weak AI in most of the use cases. So clients need to find a specific niche for that use. It's not a magic bullet. It's not going to take over the world. It's not going to triple your market cap. It's not going to help you get rid of 40% of your workforce and double your profit margins. It is another tool.
And you said it really in a very nice way, right? So the way I see it is, let's say a mechanized tool like chainsaw, you're adding it to the gardening kit. Yeah. So it is a beautiful tool. It has its use. And the most important thing is to prepare for the use or get yourself ready for the use. Understand what it does, understand how it can be applied in your landscape in different shapes and form. Because what you choose to do with that tool, this is for the clients, what you choose to do with the tools is your responsibility, whether it's internal or external or anything else. Like, there is no excuse for not understanding the tool. It'll become too big for all of us to understand and control. So it's better to invest time in the phase zero. That's something Paul, me, and others in the landscape talk about it a lot. Invest and front load upfront. Understand things, understand how it applies to the landscape. Equip yourself before taking any tool into your landscape. It saves a lot of time and money in the overall cost, especially in the project phase or its execution. So Paul, you and I know of clients who have invested in that phase zero, got themselves ready to be able to do it, and they've saved millions to even more. So, probably I'll hear your use case that you and I were talking about just before this meeting, and then we can build on that, because that's a real life example for our clients who are listening to this, who can use this in their day-to-day life.
So with a recent client, they were looking at an S4 transformation, and they were looking to enter into the markets with the usual, with an RFP, a scope of works, with the view to finishing by 2026. So this was last year initialization. Upon engaging with them, it became apparent they had portions or glimpses of a phase zero, if I could put it that way, that didn't have a complete view. And so after I'd assessed the landscape, my recommendation to them was go back and build a phase zero. And fortunately, because of the experiences and exposures I've had, I was able to let them talk to some of my previous clients around what worked, what didn't work, and what would they do differently. One of the most common questions, probably in the top three, execs ask other execs. So if you did this again, what would you change? What wouldn't you do? And these are beautiful open-ended discussions with fellow execs, the CIO, CFO, the CEO, etc. And one of the things that became apparent is they didn't actually understand the strategy of the technology and the alignment to their business strategy. So we went back and we unpacked the business strategy, and we then created a phase zero strategy specific to the digital enablement. And it took us the best part of 10 months, but we basically completely rewrote the RFP and the scope of work, so much so that I would say it went from an entry level, we'll just create a pass mark, to a comprehensive document, and the commercials that surround it are extremely robust. And the client has gone from not understanding the technological aspects to being thought leaders in the aspect and pushing the envelope. They're now going, when we're doing a report and analytics strategy, what does that look like in terms of the SAP roadmap? Is that aligned to? Is that divergent? Do we have a 70 or 80% capability coverage? If we have 80%, what are we doing with the other 20%? What is the mission criticality of that gap? And how are we going to fill it? What technological or process aspects are we going to do? And then simulate the conversation around BCP, because that's often one that's not considered enough in a cloud sense, in my experience, is what are you going to do if you have an extended outage? Because you move your real estate and your computer up into the cloud, you're in the hands of a third party. And during the prenuptials, there's all talk about basically this thing is bulletproof and it's geo-resilient. But as we've seen in the media, a couple of network links or a few out-of-date routers, and I'm sorry to hear your data center can be as resilient as a battle tank, but if it can't communicate because of your relationship with a third-party vendor who's not keeping things in sync, you're out of the game, and the market will punish you accordingly, right? So those are the bigger questions that sit outside a core technology investment. Like if you focused on Oracle or SAP or Microsoft, the conversations often sit around or orbit the technology piece, but there's other pieces in the value chain you have to consider for your enterprise to make the right phase zero type decisions. And it's so important to have the conversations. And the other elephant in the room is, okay, so what if you fall out of love? What if you head to divorce street? How are you going to handle your exit from the cloud and from that vendor? So let's not name a vendor. Let's say you fell in love with vendor A, and after 5 years, you decide this relationship is not working for the business, and you make a strategic decision to pivot to another technology or vendor. How are you going to exit? You're on subscription model. You only own your master and transactional data. You own nothing else. You basically leave with your clothes that you came in on. You need to understand what that looks like. You need to have a plan for it. Nobody likes to talk about it. It's unpleasant. I guess it's like a real estate or death planning. Nobody likes to talk about it, or having a will. But you need to have these robust conversations, because your enterprise needs to keep working even though you may have changed capabilities or technologies. It's a really, really important factor in the planning and overall strategy.
And this is so good, Paul, and thank you for raising it, the importance of phase zero and having the robust, tough conversations front-loaded up front. Because at some point, all these risks may become a real thing and issues to deal with. And in that case, the organization has a playbook to refer to, or worst comes to worst, something happens, what to do. There is a process, and there is a way that is thought through and agreed. It's better to have these conversations up front. And we've also seen, not deviating from what we are talking about, we've also seen what happens when the relationship did not go well, and if there needs to be a change in the provider or anything else. So if the plans are not in place, either way, it's going to cost a lot for the organization and to others in the ecosystem. Because end of the day, business is the fundamental. It's not the technology. The business has to keep working, and it has to serve the stakeholders it needs to serve, and that thing needs to be seamless as possible. And that's when then any organization can get its benefit. So talking about how technology has evolved and multiple vendors have come in the landscape. So in your opinion, is this importance of phase zero and all these robust relationships, do you think it has been understood in the industry with everything changing around us? So or is the industry, in our opinion, still focused on the immediate outcome, which is the sale or implementing a technology or celebrating on short-term milestones?
I would say, based on the number of rescues I've done and remediations, sadly more common the latter than the former. We're still stuck in the 90s and noughties style of the sugar hit implementation, where we onboard 1,000 consultants and we run for 18 months and the client pays through the nose. there are huge amounts of efficiencies, and I absolutely cannot get my head around how any of these projects should fail anymore. The tooling, the methodology, the governance, the process, the frameworks, they're all there. It's almost idiot-proof. So I generally, when I go into the rescue, I find that the failure point is in phase 0, and or a combination of client and SI failures to communicate, which was all tied back to phase 0, and understanding each one's the responsibilities. There are more forward-thinking system integrators out there, but I do tend to find the majority of them are still in a traditional implementation framework. And while there's nothing wrong with that clinically, I would say there is a lot more advancements in terms of value add and enablement and accelerating the process. And particularly SAP has invested heavily in automating and advancing that adoption for clients. They've spent millions of dollars with really, really amazing tools. And Thomas Surisig and them they've even instantiated a board for customer enablement and onboarding. There's a huge amount of that, but I don't see all of that spilling over to the client benefit, which is a bit sad. In terms of maturity and adoption, it's principally still stuck in that. You've seen me the last great banquet, ERP banquet, and this is how the vendors see the move to S4, because we can touch on that later around monolithics and where the future of ERP is. But the behavioral patterns I see in the market reflect that this is the last great feast, and they to gear themselves accordingly. And I've watched, for example, consulting rates not inch up, they've shot up as everybody, 2027 as an example, and Oracle have their own deadlines, and etc. So it's not nearly where it needs to be from a maturity point of view and from a client benefit point of view. There's a lot of work we can do as an industry and a community to improve that.
And I totally agree with you, right? So that's one area that our industry can improve on, and mainly focusing on long-term relationships. If we are still doing that sugar hit type of approach or this last banquet type of approach for whatever reason, then we are shortening ourselves, or we are not delivering the value for the clients. For any client, it's a matter of relationship, doing the right thing, and also collaborating with everyone in the ecosystem. That's what we stand for. So we as consultants and we as good people are serving each other mutually and getting the benefits, or everyone enjoying the benefits of all of it. And no one wins by using the sugar hit approach. And as Paul, you rightly said, there is value in phase 0. Invest in phase 0. Understand your risks, understand your mitigations, and understand what needs to be done. And have the conversations up front, which helps in mitigating a lot of risk. And if the worst happens, you know what to do. There is an exit plan, or there is, there are cards in place. And, as we see the technology that's evolving, for example, AI coming in, and we talked about it, and also, with everything going on, deadlines. So the elephant in the room. Yes, we've got the SAP deadlines and Oracle deadlines. And now this is the discussion for all of us to consider in this ecosystem. I'll get your views first. What is the future of this mammoth ERP? Yes, it's an expensive thing for the organization to keep running or keep upgrading or keep changing. Anything you do with ERP is a very expensive thing. And the other thing is there is many other composable ERPs or many other technologies that are coming in, including microservices. With all these available in that ecosystem, how do we navigate our future?
Solutions Review is inviting you to join InsightJam.com. What started a few years ago as a social media event to celebrate enterprise technology has now grown into an always-on tech community with live events, discussions, videos, vendor showcases, and industry resources. Our vetted roster of experts, thought leaders, and analysts are sharing tips and tricks daily. So if you're interested in getting involved, join the long list of companies and brands who have already participated by visiting InsightJam.com today. Now back to the show.
let's take the first mega question, right? And then let's break it down for the audience. Is what kind of lifespan and what future do we see for ERP? Right? And then we'll tackle the second question: is it where do customers go and what should they do? Monolithic ERP has a sell-by date, man. I'm absolutely convinced. Anything past 2035, 2040 is existential crisis. The sheer technology, the pace of technology, and particularly I'm a big fan of the concept of compute power taking over traditional ERP. And I've set the cat amongst the pigeons a number of times, saying that compute power is going to get to a point where I believe ERP in its current form is moot. You're going to be able to just query a system and go, what POs do I need to pay today, or what's my supply chain look like? It's not going to have to go ruffle through 200 million lines of code in a monolithic structure to give you an answer. It's not that much code, but you get the idea. It will have a set of core business rules that it has in a repository, and it'll be able to build off a data set on the fly your response. You will no longer need, as you said earlier, and I had a great smile when you said it, you don't need that pack of CDs or whatever on the shelf to go and load 3, 4, 5, 600 million lines of code. It's going to be this lean machine, and you're going to compose. It's going to be commodity based. You're going to be able to suck it up out of the market, right? And so I firmly believe that these are the last iterations, and I'll talk with some greater conviction on SAP, and I think Oracle will follow because Tweedledee, Tweedledum. But I believe S4 will be the last of the monoliths. The next one will have to be something along the lines of quantum and highly composable. And you can see SAP's sales language and stuff starting to move into that open source composable. We play with everything thing. So that's a really positive message from SAP. They're breaking up an ecosystem because I think they realize they face an existential crisis. They can't sell this monolithic structure for the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's not going to work. Clients in the future, to touch on your second point, clients in the future should be able to go to a fully composable universe where I can pick a finance tool from J. O'Callaghan Enterprises. I can pick a warehouse tool from Paul Coetser Enterprises, and there should be industry standard integrations for a material master, for an HR record, with some localizations, but I should be able to homogenize those into an offering that is pretty much seamless, and the UX will be an AI-generated UX. So I don't care about the back end. I don't care that you're running SAP GUI on one side and you're running something else on the other. For a user experience and an enterprise execution and capability, the back-end product set should be relevant, and I really believe the industry is going that way. So those microservices and capabilities you mentioned, I absolutely believe are coming to the fore. And so when you look at the big macro thing and where ERP is going, you can see the vendors' behavioral responses, right? They're moving from perpetual or on-premise licenses to subscription. That is the way the world is turning. But there's an upside for the vendors because it creates lock-in, right? You can't stop paying because then you don't have access. Whereas with perpetual license, you can continue, arguably indefinitely, right? Also, if you go on to their infrastructure as a service or their PaaS or whatever in the services platform, you're creating additional lock-in. There's also risks that you've got to look around proprietary databases, proprietary applications, proprietary integration, proprietary reporting analytics, etc. That you need to all consider. Now, these are not special nasties or funny things. They are just part of your conversation piece you have as an enterprise, understanding your technology risk and how to manage it. And that's where legal expertise like Marcus from Taft really, really benefits you. Just help navigate the commercial aspects and articulate the business risk and how to mitigate it. So that's where I see that going. And in terms of the future for clients, I would suggest to clients that they agitate and they push for more open platforms, more composable capabilities and technologies because it benefits the business. I also don't believe that the ERP cost model as it is today is a sustainable one. I believe ERP has become very, very expensive versus the value that it offers. And I'll tie that back to my earlier comment around the fundamentals of ERP haven't changed in 40 odd years. So the value you're getting, the back office is around efficiency and optimization. Clients don't really innovate in financials, for example, right? They'll have other tools for analytics and scenarios and forecasting, which sits outside of the core back office. Supply chain optimization, warehouse management, market, that sits outside of the core. So when I look at that and I look at the growth of the cost of ERP versus the value, I don't see the correlation. So I do believe that we'll get to a break point in the next 10 years or so where clients are going, I want a more cost-effective solution. And I think composability is absolutely going to be the clanger. And then along with the compute power, you're not going to need millions of lines of code that just sit there and you never touch them.
And this is an interesting aspect, right? So, Paul, when we started in our careers in ERP, organizations adopted ERP for value. We could say that was one of the fundamental reasons. They wanted to become the best run business or the efficient business. And by spending 10% of their total revenue in ERP, they were able to focus their attention on a lot more. But over the years, ERP spending has increased, but has the value increased? Probably not to the same extent that we would like. And as you say, where we are in the ecosystem or where we are in the journey is that we will have multiple composable apps doing the job of the ERP or, a part of the job of the ERP a lot better. And we may be moving to a world wherein we say multiple things from the best of the breed can all come together and still function and do the job that is required for the business. And Jan Van's thinking on this, he has quoted this multiple times with Professor Christian Claytonson. The job to be done is more important than anything else. So as long as there is a system that enables the job to be done, that is where we are ticking the box. And if we are not getting there with technology or with any other tools, we are missing something as humanity. So let's keep the eye on the prize. And
yeah, one of the other really critical aspects, you've touched on it in an ancillary fashion, is the impact of AI. I'm talking to clients about the ESG impacts. AI takes a massive amount of compute. There was an article I read a couple of weeks back where they were looking at Ireland, and if Ireland approved all of the data centers that they had planned, I can't remember the year, there was like 2035 or something, and I don't want to misquote, but it was something along those lines. It would be 70% or consume 70% of all the energy generated or consumed by Ireland. 70% by data centers whose primary job is to deliver AI services. So you've got to consider the environmental and the value impacts on AI. In the headlong rush to AI everything, you've got to understand this comes with a consequence, and particularly developed countries that consume that and have FMA or first movers advantage, there are downstream impacts on the developing world as well. And those are key considerations when you're having really strategic conversations. There are the use cases for the AI, which is your sugar hit, your immediate value or your return. But there's long-term impacts. We're building these massive data centers that you can see glowing red from space to provide all this huge compute power. There's consequences for that, right? And in a broader sense, humanity, so you've got to consider those as well, right? But I just want to stitch something closed on the composable ERP. Again, cats amongst the pigeons, but I firmly believe that within 15 years, ERP as we see it today will be dead.
Oh, yeah.
There will be sufficient compute power. Now, there are two entities that are already working on a radical ERP-esque solution where you have a core set of business rules, a localization pack for your country's regs, and that just sits on an engine, and literally the AI wraps around that, and you run the enterprise off that. So they've been experimenting with this, and I've been doing some advisory work for them. on how to make this work, where the users will just do their normal day jobs, and it won't be a standard monolithic structure. They are already working it. So I believe that will come to fruition, and that will fundamentally challenge, the industry leaders, and they will have to respond. And you can see some of their responses. And I would suggest that some of their responses match the market risk. It's so, we make certain technologies that they offer proprietary. So my system will only run with this thing. You can only make this part run with that part. And you see the move to subscription to create the lock-ins, and you can only get this thing on this subscription, but you can only get it if you put it on my infrastructure platform, and you can only get this service from me. So you see the walls going up, but clients are asking those questions, going, okay, but what's the value proposition? If I'm selling the kitchenware, what am I getting in return? Here's an interesting one. I've had a few clients ask me about bolting AI onto their corporate data pile, and some of the execs ask me, should I be charging the software vendor for access to my corporate data pile, because they are learning on our ticket and on our data and enriching their offerings? So surely I have a right to commoditize this or monetize, the correct term. And those are some pretty sticky conversations, because the software vendor is going, I'm providing the service and I'm enriching, that's just part of the deal. And clients are starting to go, but that's on my data pile, so let's talk some money. So it's a really interesting maturity curves going on in the industry, and it's just fascinating time. There's so much change going on.
And that is beautiful, right? So as we're coming to the end of the hour, so we've covered a lot of content between us, and our take on this to the clients is educate yourself, understand what is of value to you, because the world, as we know, has changed and will change drastically in the next 10 to 15 years, and choose the path that is right for you and be informed at every stage in the process. So whatever you choose to do, I'm sure we are sure you'll get the best outcome, and we as leaders are there to support you. And if you're choosing to embark on any ERP journey, we are here to support you in the best way possible. So fantastic discussion with you, Paul. Thank you.
It's awesome. It's a really pivotal point. I sense in the next 36 to 48 months, there will be some fundamental tectonic shifts, if you want to use the hype cycle terminology, fundamental shifts in the industry, and you're going to see a few fault lines forming, some cracks. You're going to see some really good strategic responses from the clients and from the software vendors. And certainly the big three, big four are going to have to make some really big existential decisions. And I do believe that as the community maturity goes, the clients are going to move closer to that decision influence area, and that's going to drive a lot of value long term. And they're going to be winners and losers. In any shakedown, there's winners and losers. But I do believe as an industry, we are going to move to an area where there's better value for the client. We're probably going to go through a bit of a valley of pain point to get there, but strategically long-term, 10, 15-year window, I absolutely believe that the enterprise of the future is going to have an on-demand model that'll be able to build and solve questions and stuff on the fly with compute. Absolutely, that's where we're going. You just look at the sheer power that's happening in compute. It boggles the mind.
Well, I think I think we can leave it. We can leave it right there. I think a nice hopeful message at the end, although ERP might be dying. So I'll get to work on renaming the show in about a decade's time.
It'll reinvent itself. Don't worry. It'll come up with a new name.
It'll have another time.
I mean, I suppose ERP software, maybe the term. I mean, enterprises will need resource planning in one form or another. And Judith, I like your message. We're here for you. We're here to help. It does, like you said, it comes back. It comes back to humans. Humans, despite all the AI, humans will be here, and humans need humans to help each other, which I think is a beautiful message. So before we go offline completely, Judith and Paul, I'm sure people are listening and maybe have some enterprises of their own that need some help. Maybe they're looking at ERP, getting into it, and trying to get in ahead of the game. So, Judith, where can people find you?
Thank you, Ryan. And LinkedIn is my best social media to contact. I'm available in LinkedIn. Direct message me or message my email ID, and I'm here to help. So our passion, Paul and I, we want to make the options available for our clients and do the right thing by the clients, and we are always there.
That's great. And Paul, where can people find out more about you and get in touch?
So the same on LinkedIn. I maintain an active social media profile on LinkedIn, so clients can reach out. And my objective is clients should be able to have a successful transformation and migration, and they deserve access to independent expertise that can help them achieve their objectives. There's no reason these projects or initiatives should fail anymore. Absolutely none. And all they need to do is invest in a bit of phase zero planning, and you can pretty much de-risk any of these initiatives. And I want to see clients succeed. I want to see them deliver the value and the outcome that they're looking for. There's no reason they can't achieve it these days.
Absolutely. So if that's something you're looking for, get in touch with Judith, get in touch with Paul, talk to them, learn more. There's a lot of great minds out there. We've got two of them right here. Judith and Paul, thank you so much for coming on Evolving ERP for episode number 3. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time with even more luminaries from the world of ERP. So if you're with us still, thanks for listening, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.